just want to, Ted Anderson, one of the vice presidents of Dorsey Maritime Center, is to fill us all in. I'm Mark Mantius, president of it. We're delighted to see all these faces, political faces, engineering faces, and race. So, Ed.
Thank you. So welcome everyone. As Mark said, I'm one of the officers and directors of the North Sea Maritime Center. The North Sea Maritime Center is a 501c3 organization that was put together for the first-class restoration of the Tupper Boathouse out here on Conscience Point. And we have been doing programming before we even had a building to demonstrate what we think is the demand in the North Sea community for program. Tonight is going to be a prime example on a program that we want to build our break to. Right now, I'm seeing some familiar faces out here, so you're going to hear me repeat myself a little bit. But right now, we're in the process of a fundraising program. And we need to raise $1 million in order to match the $6 million that the Community Preservation Fund has committed towards the restoration of the building. And the good news is we are more than halfway there. In fact, we have received over $650,000 in gifts of pledges from over 150 donors towards the first goal of that. So I applaud all of you. If you haven't donated or if you want to continue to donate, for those people that donate $3,000 to $6,000, depending upon whether it's a business or a family, a plaque like this will be permanently on the restored building. This is for the Connie family. Connie is one of our officers in back there. She's our CFO. This is the one for me and my wife, Elena, that we have donated as well. So we are not all. There's none of the directors or the officers receive a penny for what we're doing. This is all a labor of love for us, and we're actually paying for the opportunity to do this. And so we encourage you to participate. If you can't yourself participate, think about people that you know that might be interested in the project that we have here, because it's a worthwhile project, and in many ways it's bringing community together in a way that's never been brought together before. I would like to give a shout out to some of the people that are here. Bill Pell, one of the trustees for Southampton Council, is here and has been instrumental in helping us out. Julie Green, our town historian, is here today. She spoke a year ago on the history of North Sea, which was another event packed, just like we are today. And of course, a number of our office the elevator regulars are here today as well. Out there on the table out there are some refreshments. If you want to help yourself, there's also hats and shirts like the shirt that I'm wearing here. Be to wear and go out to the community and let people know that we're here and that we are the coolest organization in Morse. I also want to give a shout out to the North Sea Community Association. They have been allowing us to use this beautiful building here, this historical building, for the events that we have as we're doing the programming now. And so I thank them for doing that. Half the all proceeds that we receive here today go to the North Sea Community Association. And as you can see, this building is really looking beautiful and restored. And we're also exposed to the North Sea Community Association. Just a couple of other things about our organization before I introduce our speakers. We are now getting to the point where we need volunteers. We need volunteers for upcoming programming that we're having. We need volunteers for events like this. And so if you are interested in becoming a volunteer for us, please leave your name out in the hallway and some contact information. We would love to find ways for you to help the way that you would feel comfortable helping our organization, because we are starting to get some momentum here, and that requires some more help. We have future events coming up on September 12th. Mark Nettaletti, one of our other officers and directors, will be speaking on rain gardens, natives, and pollinators at the South Edmond Cultural Center. That'll be on September 12th. And then on September 27th, We are looking to have our first gala, the Boathouse Bash, which will be at the estate of Bob Postma, and band the Surfcasters will be there. So make sure that you sign up and that you're on our newsletter list so we can get the announcements of future programming that we're having, so you can make sure you can attend that. We're looking forward. Hopefully that'll be another big event for us. Also on social media, you can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram. All of the events that we have and put out on social media as well, so you can make sure you're in touch with us. And of course, we had a beautiful web page that also talks about our organization and some of the things that we have coming up on a growing forward basis. So, with all that being said, I know that you guys aren't all here to hear me talk tonight. You want to hear what the Tuppers have to say about the boathouse that we're going to restore. So let me introduce you to Charlie and Ned. Here's Charlie Tupper. And Charlie Tupper, or Curl Tupper, was born in 1951 in Montclair, New Jersey. Then he moved to Southampton in 1964. He graduated from Southampton High School in 1970 with my cousin, Brenda. 3 days after graduation, he was sworn into the Air Force and served as an aircraft maintenance technician, and then ultimately received the direct commission in the Air Force Nurse Corps in 1979. He served approximately 2,400 hours on various airplanes, and over 30 combat hours were accrued over Southeast Asia in 1972. He's a real hero. Colonel Tupper is married to the former Susan Hudnall of Columbia, South Carolina. They have 3 children, John, David, and Ashley, 4 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren. Charlie and Susan reside in Edisto Island, South Carolina, and in his civilian capacity, he's a retired emergency manager for the Department of Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Charleston. He is a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. Has received numerous decorations. I'm just going to give you a number of them. He has a Meritorious Service Letter, the Defense Meritorious Service Medal of 4 Oak Leaf Clusters. He has the Vietnam Service Medal with 1 Campaign Star. He has a Global War on Terrorism Medal, Republic of Vietnam Gallantry Cross with a Palm Unit Citation, and the Vietnam Medal. His older brother, Ned, over here, is lightly a lawyer. After growing up in Montclair, New Jersey, and Southampton, he received his undergraduate degree from Newberry College in 1970. Received his Juris Doctor as a lawyer from the University of South Carolina in 1974. And served as the Dean of Admissions at the University of South Carolina School of Law from 74 to 76. Was attorney advisor for the United States Tax Court from 76 to 78. Ned has served as a part-time municipal judge for Beaufort since 1987, is widely known for bringing a human and sensible touch to that position. I think you're going to hear that human and sensible touch tonight. He has been recognized by the New York Times as known for dispensing justice in cases of minor offenses with a puckish, light-hearted humor. In 2014, Ned was honored by the City of Beaufort by having his portrait commissioned and hung in his honor, recognizing his time and work and acquisition. Ned has been recognized by Super Lord as one of the competitors in the state of South Carolina. He is also a past president of Charleston chapter of the American Board of Trial Advocates, which is an invitation-only organization for the top trial lawyers in the country. And he has extensive experience with lead counsel and civil trial and as attorneys who display skill, civility, and temperament. Ladies and gentlemen, Charlie and Ned Tupper.
Sure. You just sit down. If I could, got 2 more Tuppers over here. This is my cousin. Actually, he's a double first cousin. Brothers marry sisters, not each other, brother or sisters, but Tom.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
That's right. So Tom lives here in Southampton, and next to him is my nephew, Brian Tupper, who also lives here.
Right down the street from the boathouse. Yeah. Mine too. So, all right. So I'll get started. Again, I'm Charlie. We've got about 10 minutes to wrap this up because Ned's bedtime was 7 p.m. So
Only if I have 5 Chardonnay.
Oh, okay.
I've only had 4.
We should be okay then. We should be all right. So I'm setting this up. If you go online to the website for the boathouse, there's this really good pamphlet they put together with all the information. I sort of set this up in the same manner that is. So it starts talking about the family history, how they got here, and then we'll get into how we got the property here. So the first half-ish is about the family and the property over in Cedar Crest. And then the second half it picks up on the boathouse and what data I have on the boathouse. So we'll get into that. So on the family origin, not this Thomas Tupper, although he's old, but he's not as old as the first Thomas Tupper. Came here in actually multiple times on the crossings into the Massachusetts Bay Colony into Sandwich, Massachusetts. So do we have any Massachusetts people here? The way, Brenda, you live in Massachusetts now. So the way they describe it there is if you live on the Cape, you point on your arm like this, and they lived right about here in Sandwich, Massachusetts. And he made several crossings. There was some discussion that he was actually crewed the first crossing with the Mayflower, but I don't think that happened. But he made the second crossing in 21, then he finally stayed. He lived to be 96 back then. So there is some longevity in the family, so I'm hoping that works for us as well. The second one here, I like him, was he was the closest to us, fourth generation. We're 10th generation. He's 11th generation. And then Silas was our great-grandfather and married Elizabeth Borden. And so Silas's cousin was Sir Charles Tupper. He has a history of the shortest term as Prime Minister of Canada in 1896, but he also has the title of the longest living Canadian Prime Minister. He lived to 96 as well. But Borden, that was another cousin, was also a prime minister all through World War I. So there is some history there too. Frank was our uncle. That's who we're going to talk about here, our grandfather. He was born in Truro, Nova Scotia, and number 11 of 12 kids. And then he and Maud were married in 1903 and almost immediately boarded a boat in Halifax and came down to Boston from Halifax and then on to New York. Frank had previously gone to school in New York. The closest relation to that school now is NYU for pharmacy, and he was trained as a pharmacist initially and wrote for a pharmacy journal, but he never pushed drugs. But we had all of his apothecary scales and stuff like that in the house, which were really cool to play with when I was little. The 4 boys, Ned was born in 06, not this Ned, but the oldest one, Edwin Odell Tupper. Wardell was born in 09, and John, Tom's dad, was born in 1911, and our dad was born in 1916. So a few years back, I was listening to a podcast on the how people got to Nova Scotia. And I'd also done a trip to Nova Scotia in 2018 with my family, and we took one of those little city tours and went around the city. And the girl's up there, and she's got the microphone, and she said, in the 1750s, they tried to get people to come up to Nova Scotia to settle and start farms. So they offered 100 acres if you come up with your family and start a farm, and they got a few takers. And then they said, well, they're not being able to eat, so we'll offer you 100 acres plus food if you come up here and start a farm. And they got a few more. And then they said, we'll give you 100 acres plus food plus enough beer for a year. I said, that's where my people came right then. So, and oddly enough, when I did an online course, there's a Lycum he was actually in the first group in 1754. And I'm watching this podcast, or not podcast, but a genealogy study that was online with hundreds of people watching it. And there's the guy right there. So that was pretty amazing to me that you could make that connection. But this is the family here. I know I'm standing in front of some people, but that's Frank, and then that's Maud, and then that's his parents here. That guy there is, I think, Nathan, and I can't really name any of the others. And that's Nathan there, you can see. And they had a farm there in Nova Scotia in Truro. And I've tried to find that farm
in 2016. I tried to find the house, but I couldn't find it. They even had a cat. I had a picture of, and being a cat person, when I saw that, I had to show that too. The cat's name was Beauty, and that's the farm in Nova Scotia. Again, Ned was born in 04. They started out, he was born in New Jersey, but then they went up to Montreal for a while in 07, and then came back down to the United States. The family originally had a residence in Upper Montclair, and Tom grew up in that house. I'll show you some pictures in a second. And then Frank was the president of the National Business Show from 1918 to 1954. And how many folks work in New York City recognize that's the address? If you know where that address is, right now, that's right where the World Trade Center Museum is. So that's where the office was back in up to the 1950s. This was Tom's house. This is their early picture, probably about 1930, around Christmas time, because there's a reef on the door. Really neat. What's that called? Porte-cochere, or
Porte-cochere.
Where the originally, the horse and buggies go up, and that was the barn to the house back there, which my uncle had a really cool 1910 Detroit Electric in. That was one of the first electric cars. Sadly, this is the house a couple of years ago, and that was your parents' bedroom, right? And that was boarded up. And then this is off Google, just a couple from December, and it's actually crumbling. I don't know how they do it in a city like Montclair, which is a really nice suburb of New York, and this is in a very nice area. I mean, you can actually see the skyline of New York City from the front porch of this house, overlooking it, but sadly the house is crumbling down. Pop, again, was a businessman. He ran the business show, started out just working with it, but then became the president and owned it until 54. I did find one error in here, is it said that when he sold it in 54, or when he stopped having it in 54, he turned it over to his sons, which he did not. I think the way it worked out is he came home and he told our dad, "I don't have a job anymore." And so he went from being the vice president and treasurer of a big organization to a tree trimmer almost overnight to keep the family going. So that was pretty tough. This is what it looked like when it was set up. This is a Chicago show. I don't know what year it is, but it's probably in the late 20s, probably. But they had hundreds of people there. This picture, this is coming out of that's Pop here, and when they opened the show. And the first thing I thought of when I saw this picture is Jack Ruby's going to come out and shoot Lee Harvey, because that's exactly what my sister-in-law said. It looks like Jack Ruby. It's like, no. So that's in there. This is Ann. Ann grew up in the boathouse. There are two of them in the boathouse, Ann and Frank. Ann just passed a few years ago and had a beautiful memorial here down at what was John Duck's called now? Bay Prospect, and they had it down there. But we'll talk about her a little bit. That is our dad, and that's Ned there when they worked for the business show. Some of their customers, this is T.J. Watson. Back in 1931, he's the founder of IBM. So that was a big company that worked with them. Ford was a big company. These guys all were big players with our grandfather and with the National Business Show. There were stories that, and I think this is connected to the boathouse, there were stories that Ford would actually just pull up in front of the house with a truck transport and roll cars off for each of the boys, and then they take off. But Ned actually owned a Ford dealership in Sayville up until the point he opened up the boathouse. So that's coming up.
Let me add one thing. Go back to that, Charlie. T.J. Watson, founder of IBM, we had these plaques around the house that said "Think," and that was the go word.
That was their motto.
Their motto. If you look, that looks like October 1. It's not. it's January 10th, 1930, but it was 31. So he didn't think he had to go ahead and put the 1 through it. So
He also had all that money and just didn't pull another picture out. Yeah. So, but that's a cool picture that we have in the family still. I go every once in a while on eBay and I look around for stuff. And I found this just about 2 years ago. And one of the things that kind of interested me is if you look there, it's 1929. And then I didn't really look too much closer until I got it. The business show started on the 22nd of October and ran through the 26th inclusive. The 24th was Black Thursday and the 29th was Black Tuesday. So here you are, the National Business Show. You got all these people here and it truly hits the fan like overnight while they're there. And the markets crashed, the banks were rushed. And if that's not enough, when I flipped it over, that's my grandfather's writing. I mean, I will give you 99% if I take that to a handwriting analysis. And you can see this handwriting here. That's his. That was actually his card, giving him an idea of what he had coming up, including meeting Commodore Vanderbilt at 4 p.m. So what a cool find on eBay for $15. Of course, my wife always says, why are you buying this junk? But it was kind of neat. So they purchased the home in 1917, and I didn't realize this till Ned told me the other day, that what happened in 1917, 1918, that's similar to what we just went through, was the Spanish flu. So Pop wanted to get the kids out of New Jersey and into the fresh air and away from all the people and the potential for the disease. So they purchased this place in down the road here in Cedar Crest. It was about 60 acres. It was called Rambler's Cottage. And those, even though you'll see the picture, the house was pretty big to call it a cottage, but everything was called a cottage back then. That was kind of a summer place. Later on, in the 30s, he allowed Norman Vincent Peale, who was the Marlboro Collegiate Church in New York City, stayed here, and Pop let him use the house. And I have one of his books that he signed before he passed. And in that book, it says, we stayed at a cottage in Southampton. I'm like, that wasn't a cottage, that was a house. But he was there, and it was called a cottage. Overall, there was about 60 acres that they had, and he bought it for a whopping $7,500, what we were told. The house itself was constructed in 1907. I've tried to get back with people. I talked to Bill Coral here at Coral Brothers, so people who might know some information on who would have built that back then, because there's multiple houses in Cedar Crest that have that same look and feel. There's a lot of cut cedar that was used as railings. I know a lot of you, a few of you that were here were out there. Gene was there, Steve was there. And a lot of cedar in the front of the house, and that'll be in the picture. So I don't know who the builder is, but I do think that the previous owner was this individual there, Radigan. I have a reference from 13 and 14, and there further references that the Southampton has that shows that. The addition went on and built 3 more cottages, and I'll show you pictures of those that were supplied to me by my fine cousin here. But this is a ton of a date to give me a time thing. That's a 1922 car, so that gave me a date time. When we were kids, just this and this stood. All this was gone, but that was the entrance coming off of Noyak Road. And if you look to the left, you see sky. And I've tried to figure out what that is, and I shared it to Mary Lavinia O'Connor, and she said her dad, Tom, if any of you knew Tom Lavinia, I know Gino did, Tom said, well, that's where they harvested all the cedar for the houses. So they chopped all the cedar down and made the houses and made things like this. And that's the same kind of a structure that they did for the porches and things. That's what it looks like today. If you drive by, you pass by it. And just a couple of shots to show early on. That would be Dad there. That would be John, who's Tom's dad, and the other one's Wardell. And then that's my grandfather and my grandmother. And then that would be my grandfather, and that's my dad there, and that's John.
And Charlie, that's Holmes's
I
Hill.
don't know who the dog is. If you look at it today, you won't see that eelgrass on the beach anymore because it's all gone. It died off. It was between the red tide and then other animals like the swans and birds and things that eat it. You don't see it like we saw it when we were kids because we would collect that, let it get good and dry, and that's how we'd start our bonfires on the beach for beach.
And Charlie, that's Holmes's Hill in the back.
And that's Holmes Hill behind it. To give you a reference point. So there's the entrance to North Sea Harbor would be back here. And I'm going to talk about this structure there in a second, if anybody knows what that might be. The front porch was like a centerpiece for most of our family pictures all the way through to the point where we lived on it. But this is at my dad's birthday party when I think he was 2. And I always thought as a kid, what neat antique toys he had. But that was a state-of-the-art Army tank. That was not an antique toy. So he had that's the one I remember of him out there. And again, as kids, we used to always say when he told us to get our hair cut, well, you had your hair long. Why can't we have our hair long? So another shot, the bridge. Jeff, where's Jeff?
Jeff's back there.
I'm not sure if that's the same basis as your bridge, but I'm pretty sure it's close. It's in the same spot, but it's pretty close. And again, wonderful bathing suits of the era. So that's the original house. That's the Rambler Cottage. When I was a kid, that was my room there. My parents were in this room. When I was in high school, when I was younger, and Ned and I were in the back because the back rooms were heated. Those front rooms weren't heated. But it had such a great view that I slept in there even in the winter, and sometimes the sink that was in the room would freeze over. But I had an electric blanket and a cat, and I just liked having that view out the window. From the side, you can see the house. This little room building here was called the tea house, and that was the escape pod for our grandparents when we all came out. That's where they would go to get away from the noisy kids and their dogs. But he was a wonderful man. I don't take that back. This is the house, again, early because it still has a cedar shake ceiling or roof tiles and no TV antenna. But this is from the back side of the house. And then this little covered walkway led out to the tea house so you could get out there in the back.
So wasn't there a pump house beyond it? Out of the border?
No, the pump was actually down in the basement. I think so. This is like the central place of the house too, and from spring till the first cool day of autumn, we lived on this porch. We ate dinners out on this porch. The sunsets were and still are amazing, but that's where we all lived, and that's an early shot of a late summer sunset. These bushes are here. These rabbits still guard my front porch in South Carolina on Edisto.
Which wonder where those are. You got those?
Huh? Those are my rabbits. And it's interesting behind those is after the Civil War, there were all these foundries all over the country. And the foundries didn't know what to do. So they started making yard art. And one of the things they made were these iron bunnies. Steve's got some. I've got those 2. But those 2 have been guarding the house for a long time. That's straight out. I think, Jeff, that tree's gone, but you've saved the other one. Yeah. This tree here, Jeff still has, but it's more tilted like that from the wind over the years. But Robbins Island here, and then again, see those sticks sticking up. I'll show you that again in a second. And then that looks more towards the other side. And then my grandfather actually made a panorama of the whole thing. Of the 3 photographs, made an early panorama shot. There's a dock there. Of course, you wouldn't put a dock out onto the bay nowadays. See the nice old boat out there, too. And a great view, again, of New Suffolk over there. And I always remember that White House and looking over there at that White House and thinking that it was just a little tiny box house until I drove over there. Steve and I went over there a couple of years ago, and it's a big, giant white house, but it faces that direction. It's a beautiful house. Huh? Yeah. And then this Japanese lantern you still have, right, Jeff? And Tommy has one.
Tom has one too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to have that in because I knew Jeff still had it. Now, this thing here, this bulkheading that's there, when we were kids, there was a little bit of that left. And there were also some like gearboxes and heavy iron steel devices buried in the sand that were quickly rusting away. Our grandfather told us it was a quartz sand mining facility, and they would dig the sand out of the bay, get the good quartz sand, and use it for optical lenses. So nobody, I've put that on Facebook. Can anybody verify that historically, or does anybody know anything about that?
Yeah. Sure.
If you know anything about that, that would be an interesting one. But
Charlie, Joe does.
That was a sand mining operation. That was established there long before the Tuppers, and they'd run by my great-great-granddaughter,
I'll be damned. Really?
Charlotte Bannon, who was also Mrs. Hell's great-great.
wow, let me get that from you when we're done.
Yeah.
Because I want to put that on, because I have the things on Facebook. But that's always been a mystery to us, and then Papa told us that, and just that's great here. And I knew that in this group we'd have somebody who'd be able to. The other thing I knew is I couldn't make up any stories like my kids say I do, because there's too many people here that know that that's not right.
Is that home still in the background?
Yeah, yeah. That home's still there. Yeah. So this is taken from a stereograph. If you know what a stereograph was, I've got it somewhere here. It's a double photograph that when you look at through a special device, it comes out 3D. And this was a stereograph. So I copied one of them just to get an idea of where the houses were. So there were, if you look here, first of all, if you look way out, there's Todd Point Bridge. And really, you only see one cottage out on Todd Point. I think there might be a couple more there, but there wasn't much in Todd Point at this point. This is the first house that he built, an extra cottage called Love and each of the houses had a name. And this one was Love and a Mist. And this house still remains, all three of these houses still remain. They've been modified and updated quite a bit, but they're pretty much the same footprint. And Tom's mom lived there until she passed away. Flower House is on top of the hill. That was my favorite one as a kid because it has such a cool view. On top of the hill, and it overlooked the bay. It really didn't have access directly to the creek, but it was just a pretty house. But the history behind it, I'll talk about that in a second. Marshy Turn was in the middle. You can't really see it too well there. So that's a picture Tommy provided for me. Flower House, my grandfather bought that from the New York Flower Show, and probably in the late 30s or the early 30s or late 20s even, and had it constructed out on the property. Is that the one you found the names in, or was that Love and a Mist? Okay. So they were prefab houses. They were bolted together. And Tom found little labels in them that had the name in it and who manufactured it and where it was going. And then Marshy Turn was more of a traditional cabin that you'd get here around the beach and things like that. He spoke about the cabins in one of the podcasts. Erwin Levy is here. He's a friend of mine and has a wonderful, if you love history, he's got a podcast called Our Hamptons. He and Esperanza Leon. Oh, Esperanza, hello. And we did a podcast a while back, and it was so much fun. But everything they do is about the history of this place, about the whole island. They took on East Hampton an awful lot. But maybe we can get them to, come do more out here. But he actually got me started, or they actually got me started on looking more into the history and trying to, share that history with others. And if you get a chance to listen to their podcast, it's really cool. And I did it. I was painting our sunroom, and I binged the whole thing before I ever talked to her. And I'm like one after the other, and I had the whole intro memorized, everything like that. But it's great. This is, the back of Rambler's Cottage. The back porch, you can see a little bit of difference over the years. That's my mom and dad and our dog, Tuppy. And then that's me. And that was Labor Day. I snuck home from training in Texas and arrived here. My brother Bill picked me up at JFK, brought me in, and surprised mom and dad. They were still in bed. So that was kind of fun in 1970. They had airplanes then, too. Again, Davis Creek, and then you can see Todd Point. Very few houses out there. Again, that's the dock that we saw in the other picture when you saw that. And some sailing pictures from that. Gene Oshrin took me up in his airplane in about 77, and we took a swoop over Cedar Crest and took these pictures. And this was before a lot of the construction. So this is about a 30-acre lot here that was shared right about down the middle. This side was my Uncle John's, and this side was my dad's. This is Jeff's father-in-law, Ed Toohey, and Phyllis Toohey's house as they were building it. It's still under construction. You can see all this stuff around it. That's our original old circular driveway that would come around to the back of the house. The Toohey's house is actually forward of where our house was. It more sits where the front yard was. And then Jeff built his house slightly behind it. But the original garage still remains, and they still use that as their garage. So this would be Lebanon Misk, Marshall Turn, Flower House. And then the woods back here. Originally FOP, only this all here, and then the creek or the beach around about to here. And then my cousin Frank bought that house from my grandfather in 1954 for a whopping $6,000 with that property there. And what Ned remembers is that after he paid for about a year, my grandfather just said fine and signed it over to him. So he had that property out there, and then his kids sold it after he passed in 96.
Do you locate Norton and Indian Road on that map at all?
So this would be Indian Road. And then which block would...
Cedarberry and Berry Road.
Norton is them.
This one? Or this? Closest to the water. Yeah. And now, obviously, this is winter. You can see there's some icing over of the channels and stuff. Thank you for that flight, Gene. That was fun. Tim Corwin did this one for me a couple of years ago. And the thing I love about this, and I talked to Jeff tonight about it, is this is the property here. Look at the trees. I mean, they've done such a beautiful job of keeping alive some of the trees that my grandfather planted, and the newer trees that they put in, and it's just gorgeous. Whereas some people will come in and say, I need the view, and knock everything down. It is absolutely gorgeous property. And as a family member to another family member, I appreciate the stewardship that you guys have put into that property, because I know my grandfather would be proud. And that's Pop. That's my favorite picture of him, because he was Canadian, but in 1924, he was naturalized, and I think my grandmother was a couple of years after that and got their citizenship. And that's, if you look, that's a 48 star flag. So that's before so that would have been 59 when we picked up the 2 extra states. And I know that's the same bridge that Jeff as you have. And I took that one, I think, in the late 70s. And then this is one I took at Jeff's house in 2023, and I compared the two. It's just fun to look at. I wish I could get better contrast in this one, but for the most part, things are the same. And it's just been really maintained nicely, and the beauty of the land. So in 53, they had their anniversary. Now this gets us to the boathouse. This is taken inside the residence portion of the boathouse. So you can see the windows, the way they're configured. And when you see the outside pictures of the boathouse, and even in their plans, that's how they're going to make them. That's my cousin, my Uncle Wardell's wife, Mina. That's Tom's mom, Mary. That's our mom, Helen, and they were sisters. And that's Kay. She's Ned's wife. Kay, I'll talk about that in a second, was really big in the community. She was from New Jersey, grew up right behind 354. Did you know that? They were on Highland, right behind it, about half a block up. So I don't know if there's any shenanigans going on, but they live pretty close together. But she actually passed away from, I believe, cancer in 57. And this would be John. That's Tom's dad. That's Fordell, Ned, my dad, Bill, and then Maud. She passed away in 55, which would have been 2 years later from rectal cancer. And does anybody remember Smitty's Fireside Inn? Yeah, we got some. It was later Gannon's. They did their anniversary party at Smitty's. I don't know if they bought a round for $2.55, but I don't think anything will ring up at $2.55 today. But they had all dressed up and ready to party. They had a whole table down there. And that's the honored guests on their 50th anniversary. And then later, after Maud died, and Pop had a friend who lived down on Bowden Square right across from Herb McCarthy's, Elizabeth Burnett. And Elizabeth was such a sweet lady. And they got married when he was about 80. They were married. So I would have been about 9 when they got married. And I remember Dad coming in. It's still in New Jersey. And he said, Pop just got married to Elizabeth. I said, oh, where'd they go for the honeymoon? And he gave a good laugh, too, because wondering, two 80-year-olds where they're going to go for their honeymoon. But they had the house in Bowden Square and the one, so they'd spend winters in Bowden Square and the summers out on the beach. This is the kitchen, actually to the point where we lived in it. The coal stove was still in it. And the kitchen table, that went with the fire. Pop was deadly frightened about fire in that house because the whole house was this pine paneling. And it had been re-lacquered at some point, we think in the 40s when he moved in permanently. This is carbon tetrachloride in a glass bubble. And if there's a fire, you're supposed to throw the carbon tet at the fire and put it out. It didn't work. Okay, we'll see that in a second. And that was Ned. So we got there at 64. And Ned got Pop's Studebaker. So it's a 53 Studebaker. And that was his first car. And that's the garage there, which Jeff still uses. And then that's a little bit later in 67 during a March snowstorm. And we can see the cars there. We had Volkswagens. Ned had an old Mercedes 190 and a Corvair. Then in December of 74, my brother Bill and Steve and I were working at Steve's house, actually in the Martins' house down on North Sea Road. We were doing something in the bathroom, and a fire alarm goes off, and Bill was from the fire department, so of course he takes off. And then about 10 minutes later, the fire department dispatcher calls Steve's house, and 4 cell phones, obviously, and says, Charlie there, yep. Tell him to get home. What for? Just tell him to get home. So Steve and I get in my car, we take off, and put my little volunteer ambulance light on the top, illegally, he's telling me now, and as you came over the hill that goes down to the Fish Cove Bridge, is that right, Dane? With Squaw Island Motel there then. The whole sky was orange. I mean, it was just bright orange. And I just remember pulling in and being sort of frantic, and Steve was with me, and got out and helped get things pulled away and stuff. But that was where I was living. That would have been the kitchen here, and then where I was living there. It started towards the front of the house, and the wind was pushing back.
It had to be a 30-mile-an-hour
It was
wind
at
that
least
night.
30 mile an hour, and gusts of winds even higher than that. When Dad called the fire department, they hooked them up with somebody up in Yapbank. From there, they didn't know where to send it. They first sent the fire trucks to Frank Tupper's house. And then from there, I guess they saw the sky and followed the flames. Then they actually took pumper trucks and drove them down into the creek to the west side of the bridge. So they were down into the marsh, and they threw devices into the creek that would pump the water out of the creek. And they pumped salt water on the house all night. they dispatched from Southampton Fire Department as well. There was not much to be saved. That's what it looked like the next day. And it was pretty much gone. That would have been, again, where I was. The front's totally gone. But some of the kitchen remained. I still have some furniture that was in the kitchen. Plus, there was one big sideboard in the dining room. And as the dining room burned, the ceiling came down and protected it. And so I have that in my dining room in Edisto, South Carolina. So we did save some things out of it. I actually found my flying records from the Air Force when I was first in the Air Force, so that I could maintain those when I flew as a flight nurse later on. But you can see that, like, tables and things, the amazing things that were in that house. Our cousin that was in the picture with all of us on the porch was into antiques, and he said he was going through some of the dishes that my grandmother had that were old china from China. And Choppy picked that one up. He said, "Do you like this one?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "This will buy you a new Porsche 911. I was like, "Nope!" All that gone. So it was just, the house is full of antiques like that. Shortly before the fire, because I rooted through corners of the house all the time, I found volume 1, number 1, volume 1, number 2, and 3 of Life magazine at the bottom of a stack of magazines. So they were like pressed like they were brand new. And for anybody who's into comic books, I found volume 1, number 1 of The Flash there too, which would put one of my kids through college today, but that was also burned. And that's what we got out of the press on the 12th. From the boathouse, and running right along, Ned was 21 years old when he first wrote the first letter, and 28, and then the second one in March. This is kind of a timeline that I actually got off the North Sea Museum site of who owned it through the time. So basically, Pop had it, he bought it first in 29, then transferred it to Ned in 1930, and it was with Ned until 59, and he sold it. And that's Ned right there. So I don't want you, obviously we're not going to read through the letter, but he talks about selling boats. Sounds like a good idea. He thinks he could sell airplanes. He said, if I do go and sell boats, I want to do it on my own. So, hey, Dad, give me the money, but mind your own business. Leave me alone. He also, we thought this was pretty bold. He's 21. He calls his dad Frank. We were just scared enough to call him Pop. So he was that kind of guy. And then he talks about possibly doing some advertising around town. He goes on and talks about, hey, again, this isn't a family business. It's got to be mine. You're in on it, but I'll pay you back at the going rate. So these are the highlights on it. That he loved the boats idea. His degree from Cornell was in automotive engineering. He wanted to sell boats, planes, whatever he could. He wanted to start it the next summer. He wanted to do it himself. He wanted to do a lot of advertising. But he didn't want it to be a family business, and he wanted to borrow the money at family rates. Then a couple months later, he followed it up, and he's starting to think more into what he's going to do. Again, I'll do a summary. Ramsbottom is what that area was called, where they went. He pretty much had picked it at that point, would be a great spot to build it, because it had the frontage on the road, and then also the water right there, so you'd have a perfect spot for a marina. And then I kind of caught onto this one recently. He talked about dredging Woolley's Pond. If you know about where Peconic Marina is now, the entrance there was never there before. That was actually opened up in the 30s, and that was open to the sea at that point. Prior to that, it was a closed pond. And he talked about it before they did it. I'm not saying that he did it, but it was done later on. He also talked about getting some railroad ties and some rails from Long Island Railroad. He also, in there, he came up with the name Motorcraft, who thought watercraft, North Sea boat, Peconic, or Motorcraft, and that's what he stuck with. The Ramsbottom current location, that's what they bought. They discussed the dredging and then the ties from the Long Island Railroad. I talk about maybe bringing a boat in called the Sheik, and I can only find this and another boat in there too. The logo design, which is what I've got on the shirt here, my daughter transferred it. If you look at the way he did it, he set this up. That's supposed to be an airplane. And then that part's supposed to be the sea sled, which is one of the boats that they sold. So they put that together to make that. And then that's actually final construction. I pieced that together from the film that Tommy got me. But there's putting some of the final touches on it, and it's got all the new woods. I hope it'll look that cool again real soon. And then a few shots of it over the years. They had gas pumps out there. This is how Ned would go to work. He'd step out the front door, walk across, and he was at work. There wasn't direct access inside that I know of at that time. There was later on. But at that time, the residence was totally separate, and it wasn't big. It was very tiny to raise 2 kids in. And I do remember my cousin Frank saying that as he got older, he punched his way through and moved into the upper portion of the boathouse side. So he found a place to be.
There's going to be a residence in the restoration as well.
Say it again?
There's going to be a residence
Yeah.
in the restored building as well.
Can I rent it? And again, this is another shot of the front. The interesting aspect of the way he designed it, and the reason why one of those railroad ties, is if you see here, you can go straight through the boathouse and pass through. It was set up to be basically 5 large boat bays. So you could put a boat, center, a boat, and a boat to work on, and then move them around on the rails. This is inside in the center bay. And then this is when that same boat's been pushed out. And when I worked there in 1967, that railing section was still there. The rails were gone, but I mean the cutaway going into it, and then the Hawkins house is across here. That's how he dropped the boats into the water. They'd run them down the railroad tracks on a cradle, and then they had a winch that would pull it back up. He also used to make moorings that would go out into the harbor for people. So as they collect parts and stuff off of different boat projects, the heavy things, they throw them into great big feeding tubs, galvanized feeding tubs. And then when they got it all full, they'd fill it with concrete and put a hook in the middle. Then they'd take it out, and there must be 40 of them out in the harbor somewhere. I get another shot from the outside. When we were in high school, annually we did a bottle drive, and then we used the money from the bottle drive to fund the senior trip, which I didn't go on, so I should have gotten some money back, but I didn't. But but we were coming through here, and Joe O'Donnell was my social studies teacher then, if any of you remember Joe, or Mr. O'Donnell. And he was one of my favorite. I mean, there's some great teachers in that school, but he was one that really, somebody like me that struggled with school, he took care of me. And right here, there was a whole stack of bottles. And I said, well, my family used to have that. Let's grab those. So we went and we got all the bottles from there too. I don't know if we were supposed to, but we got them. They sold sea sleds. This is one of the boats. But they sold, if you look at the design of the hull, it's like a cathedral hull. It's actually kind of the hull that inspired the design for the Boston Whaler. Very popular design. The small ones, I think they sold a lot of these small ones because you could put a little outboard on them and they really went fast. That's some sea sleds. They sold Johnson outboards, and I brought this 3 horsepower. That's a 53 Johnson 3 horsepower that I picked up from a neighbor. It almost looks new. There's not even any wear on the skeg. But as if the museum wants it, I bought it for them. And they sold Garwood boats. Somebody online asked me, what does Garwood stand for? And it was, the guy's first name was Garland. His last name was Wood, and he went by Gar. So it was Garwood boats. But they were real fast. Had big Packard engines in them. They were playing off real nice. This was actually a postcard they sold, or they had at the time. And we always loved the fact they got fedoras on and stuff. And I've always wondered what he did that made him have to sit way in the back like that, because he's on his own. I think this is it's some interesting stuff. This is before they actually got the boathouse, 1929. This is out of the archives of the East Hampton Star, which is, if you're looking for stuff, that's another great place to go. But that shows distributed sea sled, Garwood, Johnson outboards, and it talks about, what they're selling and stuff before they got the boathouse. And then this part here is later on in 53. Kay was real big in the community. She loved the community. She would host like quilting and sewing events at the boathouse. And they also hosted this dance school from New York City that would come out here and teach dance in the boathouse, which I always thought was pretty neat. And I found lots of references to that in the East Hampton Star as well. So I thought that was pretty neat of how the community tied in. I mentioned Frank before. This is Frank here. That is his second oldest son, Jim, who passed away in 2001. And that is his only daughter, Kit, or Catherine. And Kit lives somewhere out in the Midwest. None of them are here anymore. Richie is a contractor up in Hampton Bays, and his wife, Diane, is in real estate in Hampton Bays. This property was sold probably in 96, 97 after, or 97, 98 after Frank died, and then their family, in some manner, transferred the property that was on the beach back to the town. So there's a plaque down there, and it's a third plaque because the first two got stolen. And then the town was really nice to work with me over this winter and put a new plaque out there. And I actually had them corrected because it had on it that the family had owned it since 1929, but in 4 generations, when actually it was originally owned by my grandfather, who in 1929 passed the property to my Uncle Ned to hold it during the Depression so nothing would happen. And then after the Depression, he didn't give it back. So he did keep it, but again, it was taken good care of. Similar to that, I was doing another genealogy study out of a genealogy group in Canada. And in that, it said that Frank Tupper was in the National Business Show. He owned it until, the Depression hit, and then it crushed it. And his sons all moved away. And I wrote the guy who ran the website, I said, that's not true. And he said, well, a very renowned genealogist told us that's true. I said, well, I'm a very renowned grandson of the guy, and that is not true. And he changed it. So, and then Anne, there's Anne there, and that's her husband, Bill. And so that picture was August 19th, 1956. And Anne, like I said, passed away in 2015. She was 83. And then Bill passed away a year later. They had been divorced at that point. One thing Ned and I remember that was really kind of cool is up here by the light, right about there was this giant spider web. And the spider, to me, at that point, was 56. I was 5 years old. Must have been this big. And Frank just walked over and he went, and it was gone. And I said, this man is a superhero. I mean, he could squash spiders, and I'm scared to death of spiders. But we both remember that like it was yesterday. And that's at my mom's memorial in 93. That's Karen in the middle. That's Ann's daughter. She lives down in Bluffton, South Carolina now. And then Ann is on here, and that's Frank. Frank looked like that from the time I remembered him to the last time I saw him. He never changed. And sadly, he was on a cardiac cath table getting a catheterization and coded and died in 97. A little bit later, anybody remember when it was Lorsan or Lorsan or whatever it was? So Lorsan was a crazy nightclub. And I worked there that summer. The 67 I worked there, but I worked there during the day. I worked for a guy named Jerry Maguire, not to show me the money, Jerry Maguire, but the guy who ran the boathouse, Jerry Maguire. And I've got a $20 bill for 2 days' work each weekend that I worked. which was enough to put gas in my boat and do a few other things. And I would go to work by boat. So I'd take my little skimmer and I'd get to work on time and scoot around. I'd pump gas, and he'd give me his car to drive down to pick up oil and stuff and different things that we needed. At the end of the summer, it was always traditional. You gave the kid that worked for you, $100 or something like that for a bonus. So I was waiting for that nice big $100, and Jerry comes out and says, "We haven't got $100." I said, "But if you want, you can have my Volkswagen Beetle." I was, heck yeah! So Gene, when I first met him, when we worked for Volkswagen, he and I got that thing working. The brakes were locked up, all sorts of stuff, and then eventually turned it into a dune buggy. And Gene and I built 5 of them for Brill, and one of them was mine, which was such a fun car. But that was my bonus from working there. And then in the 70s, it was Southampton Marina, and then restaurant, and actually, which hurricane was it? Was it Bob? Or was it before Bob? Steve and I were driving around in a hurricane in his Bronco, and the cops were stopping us, yelling at us, we should get off the road because it's a hurricane. So we went down to the marina to make sure everything was okay. And there were boats that were going under. We lost one. It's one turn turtle, you said? And a couple other were going. We helped Don, the guy who owned it at that time, save a few boats and tie them off and things like that. But we just loved running around the hurricane. But I didn't work for him then, but we were still affiliated with him and helped him out some when we could. And then this is basically where we stand now. I had the logo made for my truck, my old truck. Put it on the side. People would stop me in South Carolina and ask me where I was from. So it made them very confused. But they've done a lot of work to bring that up, and you can see those pictures over here of it on the front, and then the side that faces the water. And then I kind of put this, I had these pictures here. So I showed you that earlier. But my grandfather on my mom's side made that painting there. This one. And he did that in about 1930, but it's exactly off that print. And then this one here, I got actually through Irwin's podcast. I saw this young lady here, Casey, who grew up on Todd Point. And Our Hamptons has a great podcast on that one too. And her grandfather owned the property out there. And I saw that picture and I went, oh my God, that's from Todd Point looking back at the house. So I got a copy for myself and I got a copy for Ned. And when he opened for Christmas, I said, when you unwrap it, you have to tell me what it is. And I opened and held it up, said Todd Point. So what a great picture and what great art she has if you get a chance to look at that stuff. Not meaning to throw commercials in here, but. And again, that's Ned and Kay in 1931. And that's about what I got. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we have time for some questions, and we'd like to hear some memories from the audience as well. So please.
I have a
Yes.
What sort of fire? A fire.
The fire inspector thought it was either electrical or there was a fire in the fireplace that night, and that maybe a spark came out of that on the roof, which I doubt. I think more it was electrical because the house was wired, after it was built. So there's that old BX cable through everywhere. And the attic was open to the air front and back. So when, the salty air would pass through. And that house moved in the wind. You could feel it in the wind.
Just to back up with that fire, I was on college Christmas. I could have right at Todd Point. Just over the roof.
Okay. So probably
They went back to the firehouse if they were having a meeting.
really.
I told the chief there's a big fire in the depot at Tupper areas. This is before Elon was even.
Wow.
So we came over with the fiscal priest, so you see the glow by that.
Yeah.
And that's when the alarm came in. And I left my firehouse in South Bend, came in. Yeah, finally got to ride back to the South Bend people. But I'm pretty sure
It started from the fireplace thing.
the whole loop was just in flame.
So I wonder if Doug Dolliver was fire inspector. If that was he okay. He was a classmate of ours too.
I'm trying to remember the chief's name, but it was pretty intense fire. It was
1974. Yeah, I showed it to a fire chief friend of mine. This was the picture. He said, that's fully engulfed. Yeah, it was. Good observation, Chief.
You're right out the wind that night.
Yeah, it was wicked. And the next day, from the salt water they were pumping, where it was frozen like this from the wind, all coming down. I didn't mention it earlier. One of the things too, as far as the community goes, is the first meetings for the the North Sea Fire Department were held in the boathouse, and Ned was the first chief, and then Wardell was a chief later on. I think Ned was chief a couple of times, but I think his picture's still downstairs. Or if he used to be, all the chiefs. Thank you.
Charlie, what kind of boats did they build other than the ones you've already talked about?
Those are the only ones I know about. And really what happened, if you think about 1959, fiberglass was taken over. And he didn't change to fiberglass. I mean, he could have switched to MFG, or what was the one you had? Was that an MFG?
Yeah.
Older fiberglass?
MFG, yeah.
So the early MFGs, if you looked at them, they actually looked like a lap straight boat, but they were fiberglass. And as those came out, he started losing sails and things like that. I don't even remember the big motors at that place. I just remember the little ones like that.
Biggest motors they had back then was like a 50.
Yeah. Well, mostly the
Mercury.
18 to 35, I think, were
Yeah.
the big ones with Johnson.
Charlie, I got a question.
Yes.
Is it true that he took that dude buggy of yours and drove to the top of Holmes's Hill?
I took that dune buggy and I got it about 6 feet up Holmes Hill, and somebody came up, maybe somebody in here, on top of the hill and started yelling at me. And I backed off and I headed off. And you could still get on the beach then. You had
250 years ago.
I wish I will tell you, there was one thing. One time I was out, it was right after we got here, and there was a giant sign on the sand hill that said one way pointing up. And I was out in my boat and I kept running around, and there's a helicopter filming it. And I finally found somebody on the beach, and they were filming a Pepsi commercial for their one-way bottles, so you could throw them out in the garbage instead of recycling them. And I never saw it come on TV, but they put this giant, it went from the bottom to the top of the hill. It's a one way.
I have a story. I worked at Lausanne probably 67, 68. And it was a wild place.
I was there too then. I was pumping gas there.
But anyway, Jeff not used those as story. Saw them or meant to get Nintendo what this I gave $100. And I next day I was over his house and gave it back.
Yeah.
No, that's even worse. The way it was set up, I must have lost my train of thought, but there were probably 50 to 60 Kodak carousel projectors around the top of the boathouse. And then they'd sync the projectors to the music. And so it was a light show. It was one of the first light shows that they would do. And a disco ball?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know the layers were French.
Yes, it's true.
Oh, okay. And the other thing I remember about it is being a car guy that I was. We'd go out there and there were Shelbys and there were Mustangs and there were Jaguar XKEs and Corvettes. And that's where I saw my first Cobra. AC Cobra was there. It was like British Racing Green.
And Norwegian decided to steal them in my home. Port Carson.
It was, and my dad rented Love in a Mist. The first summer we were there, he rented it to two couples. They didn't really want to rent it to two couples. These two guys showed up with their wives. And after they agreed and they got the rental and the guys came in, they would throw the biggest parties at that house every weekend in the city. And we'd wake up and the whole side yard would be full of cars.
Yeah.
And I don't know where they were sleeping because it's not a big house. But they were either on top of each other or on the floor or whatever. But Mom got a hint that something was up when she went over to the house and they had installed a payphone outside the house because they didn't want any of the people getting on their phone and calling long distance to the city. So, pretty crazy.
I just wanted to mention I found a little newspaper, but basically you had the last slide up. William Lafon was the architect that designed the boathouse. also designed the
original town hall, which was Saks and
Oh, really? Wow, that takes you through. Wow. Wow. I always wondered how they came up with that. Didn't know that.
blueprints. Any of that.
Wow.
Yeah, he died rather young. And then been able to track down any family members.
oh yes, and he worked plans for he did schools too.
But it's fun doing that kind of research, though, isn't it? Yeah. Every time I look in boxes of stuff from our house that burnt down that I still have at my house, I find something new. I find a new picture that I never saw before. And with scanning capabilities and then adjusting the contrast and the color now, I found that one picture of them all on the beach. You never could see that before until I scanned it and then popped it up and realized that was Dad when he was like 2. And that was the beach. And, that's where, and I've got pictures of my kids on that same beach. So it just kind of, and I showed that to my daughter. I think, see that? That's the same beach, 1918. And the idea that, like Ned told me, that they came down here because of the Spanish flu, where I live on Edisto Island, South Carolina, I'm on 5 acres with nothing around me. And I told my kids the same thing during COVID. I said, if you want to come down here, come down here. You're not going to catch anything. So it's worked in 1918 and we're born today. Yes.
You showed the timeline on everything, but I'm not sure I caught it. When was the boathouse actually?
The building itself, I think about 32, because the video that I played in the beginning, it shows Frank when he was he was a toddler, so he was barely walking. So he might be 14, 16 months old. And so that would have put it in about early 32 or late 31, when that would have been. And that shows the final aspect of it. I'm very thankful that my grandfather, like most of my kids, was a total geek. He had every camera you could think of. He had movie cameras. He had every type of sound equipment you could imagine of the day, of the different types of phonographs and stuff, from the early ones with tubes and later ones that were on wax. And all that stuff was packed away in different corners and nooks and crannies of the house when it burned. And again, that's one of the reasons why it burned so well. My grandmother was also the reason why I found those old magazines, or the Flash. She saved all the newspapers, and the whole attic, outside of the attic, was filled with, stacked this high with newspapers. And so as that stuff burned, it would come down and collapse. One of the firemen came to me and said, "What kind of explosives do you have in that house?" And I said, "There's nothing." He said, "Oh, yes, there was. The doors blew out of that thing and blew up." And we went the next day, it was filled with magazines.
What she did, she made time capsules. She really did. And it would say to be opened in 30 years or something like that.
I didn't know that.
That's why you got the Life magazines. I think
that was actually in the living room.
Well,
corner cupboard.
up in the attic, she
attic,
had time capsules.
And there was stuff in that attic that people would kill for like nooks and crannies, like old brass boat lights and things like that, red and green, and the spotlights and different things like that.
But it's a good lesson.
Yeah.
And the lesson is that stuff you think is so important really isn't that important.
Stuff.
And you'll get over it.
As long as you got your life, you just stuff. But it was just, Steve and I were talking today, that was kind of like a turning point in my life. I mean, it's like, okay, now what do I do? And then Ned was down in South Carolina, and I had gone down there to help him move down there and walked around the campus. I was actually a member of the Southampton, the Dunes Post Volunteer Fire Department, which is now that new building down on North Sea Road. I was, along with Bill, we were both early members of that, and so was Steve. And they sent me to an EMT course up in Stony Brook. And first I liked the course. That was pretty cool. And I liked all the stuff you got to do. And I decided, for some reason, well, Brenda was a nurse. Michelle Steve's wife was a nurse. Well, that sounds like a good idea. I'll try that. So I applied for nursing school in South Carolina. The good thing about being a male in nursing, when your GPA from high school is about a 0.00241, is they'll bring you in because you're a guy. So it worked. And I did better in nursing school, believe me. But it was a turning point in my life, that fire was. And everything we seem to talk about in the family is pre-fire, post-fire is how it goes. Because that house meant so much to us, as did Tom's house in New Jersey. We always just refer to that as 354. The house we had in Montclair, that's still a home house that we look at.
But
again,
the fact that our friend Jeff has done such an amazing job
of maintaining it.
You really have, Jeff. I mean, it's absolutely amazing what you've done there.
Yes. I thank you for that.
I have a next story.
Okay.
It was down in Buford. My wife has family there, so either weddings or funeral. I hadn't seen her in a long time, and I said, have lunch. He said, I have to go to court and set people's bail, and I was arrested in a week. You come to some court with him, and people coming in chains and knives. Shuffle in. And he said, I'm in a good mood because that gun Ernie's here. I'm what you all go. And it did. So it was mothers of these young prisoners jumping up and hugging me.
It was worth it to see my friend Ernie.
So one part of the history that he didn't cover, I got to sit there and experience. If you guys remember Country Club of Conscience Point, the end of the nightclub experience. This is for Robs. Lizzie Grubman. I was not there with Lizzie Grubman, okay? I was, but my high school, like I remember one day I was just walking my dog down to Conscience Point, and I didn't know the whole history of the Tupper Boathouse. I had heard about it, but it wasn't, to me, it was always something, but they were just opening up Country Club of Conscience Point. I'm 15 years old and walking up, and they're like, hey, you want to jog? And do you want to be a busser? So I started as a busser, and I became quickly the first people that they had two bussers on Friday night and Memorial Day weekend. And the guy gave me $20 as a tip out, and they were like, we need more help. So I got my best friend from high school, come on, and then we got like $20 that night on Saturday, Memorial Day weekend, and my friend's mom was like, absolutely not. She worked in a restaurant. Turned out the guy they hired had gripping me off because I was a kid, so we fired him. He said, you guys work hard, hire your friends. So we have all of our friends from the high school class 95. We're all staying down at my house, and my brother was parking cars on our lawn. We live on Oldfield Road, but that was the night club. Like Seinfeld was there with Sal's oldest scene, and I'm like, yo, she's like 5 years older than me, and it was just a real fun time. But like, I'll have seen the photos there. You see, the residents. And I'm like, oh, I remember. That's where we were hanging out, like taking our breaks, and like a bar area, and the outside was farm fresh, and we worked our butts off. And I didn't realize, because I was like 15 or 16, how loud it was until 4 o'clock in the morning. I apologize. I didn't. That wasn't a BJ, but I was there from 2 o'clock at campus. It was 11 in the morning, basically, and it was, you couldn't have for a funner, growing up and hardworking experience with, and it was always changing. And then the year I left, I stayed down for I went to school with Bar to become a school teacher, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to stay down here and work. And then I came back up. I came back up.
And I looked that up, and I was going to say something, but I figured I'm going to keep the happy stuff in here.
I'll take the arts. That was the end of and then watching it, I remember in Kobe, I lived, and ended up traveling and teaching overseas. And when I came back, right before Kobe hit, and they were doing a lot of the work on it. And I remember they had just done they lifted. Yeah, they elevated it. And then they didn't stop work, or I think the works that are there now were put there in March 2020. And I was like, so hopefully, something like this will help spark, get that for you to do. Well, it ultimately it did, because that controversy was really the birth of our organization, right? So the community at that point was sick of it. And so the Maritime Center was started. And that really was kind of the birth of our organization. Yeah. That's kind of how there you are now. Well, there you go. Well, how about a round of applause? And then cast the presentation. Please come up here and look at all the memorabilia that they have up here from that's not on the screen we just saw. Also, as you walk out and you want to help us for the financial portion of what we're doing, we have brochures out there that explain exactly what we need to do, how to do it, how you can participate, and if you want to volunteer to help us out, please don't leave without giving us your name and contact information. Otherwise, class dismissed.
Thank you so much. And if you do come up, be careful of these wires that are here, please. That's my emergency manager guy outside coming in.
I just want to add one thing that may be clear to those who looked at drawings. This great building, wonderful history, beautifully explained in a thoughtful, loving way and a clear way. Our vision is to create a building where this can happen, where there will be boat building once again, there'll be sailing lessons for 10 adults, things like this that the community needs. And that's what we've been working on for the last 15 years. And we're getting very close, so please join.
And the community really needs it because one thing you notice, if you grew up here, that harbor and that bay this time of year was just buzzing with boats. And small boats, not gigantic boats. They're just the locals that owned a boat and threw it in the water for the weekend to go over to North Sea Beach and go water skiing. You don't see that anymore. Those are all gone. The time has taken those away. And to have the opportunity to put a school in there to teach kids how to sail and how to motorboat too, because you need to learn how to motorboat because you could do bad things in that. But what a great opportunity for the community. Thank you all. Thank you, everybody.